So PB writes in the Hidden Teaching Beyond Yoga, the passage of the last few years with its widening comprehension consequent on incessant search and its gradual growth of unusual experience did not permit me to rest satisfied even with this important development. So PB's still restless. That's one of the great things about PB. He never stops moving ahead. He keeps going to the next. He keeps seeing what's more. He keeps feeling there's something more. So he's feeling this restlessness. He says, once again, I reached the old position of standing at what seemed to be an impassable barrier. Puzzling questions punctuated my ecstatic satisfactions. The knowledge that there were apparently summits still unclimbed filled me at times with aching discontent. Phoebe is really a true seeker,
And he called himself a researcher.
researcher.
Really, he wanted to search a little more about. And he found
He
somebody.
found somebody. He says, from what am I graduated at last to what is the meaning of the world. So he's looking for another teacher, and now he's famous, right? So now he's invited to the palace of the Maharajas. He's traveling in like the upper elite of Indian society. With at that time, India was still broken into all these states that were ruled by kings called Maharajas. And PB becomes very close with the Maharaja of Mysore, who he ended up having unbelievable respect for. And through the Maharaja of Mysore, he's invited to participate in a philosophical study group. So the teacher in this philosophical study group is named Subramanya Iyer. And PB is invited to be part of the study group, which includes a lot of swamis from the Ramakrishna order who are also going through a philosophical training in Advaita Vedanta. And actually, Siddhisvarananda, who we mentioned earlier, is in that study group. So that's how they become close. And by the way, PB had unbelievable admiration for the Maharaja of Mysore. He said he was an example of what Plato called a philosopher king. He was an example of an inspired leader who had the welfare of his people at hand and who was a philosophical, spiritual person, not only a political person. So now he's studying with Iyer and he's studying Vedantic texts. He's trying to understand how is the world not separate from me if non-duality is really true? What is the nature of the world? Not only what is the nature of the self. And he writes a PhD thesis. He feels it's important in his career as a writer to be called doctor. So he gets a PhD and he dedicates the PhD to Subramanya Iyer and he says, you unfolded to me the higher wisdom of your land, expounded its most ancient books, and explained its most imperishable philosophy. So I think the important thing here is expounded and explained. That's where Iyer went beyond Ramana. We're not saying Ramana didn't know into this. He didn't go into the
It
details.
wasn't his task to speak about, even if he knew, of course.
And also his presence was so powerful, maybe he didn't need to say anything, right?
It wasn't his role.
So PB says, I was indeed fortunate to have the privilege of your instructions, for you yourself were an initiate into the esoteric tradition of the great Shankara. And it turns out, we said there's 5 Shankaracharyas, and the Western one is called Sringeri. And Subramanya Iyer was a student of the Jaguru Shankaracharya of Sringeri. That was his teacher. So much later, eventually PB goes back to the West, and now he's planning to come to India again for the 3rd time, and he writes Iyer the following. May I take this opportunity to tell you how much I miss the Advaita class. The surgical operations which you have been performing on us have cut away some of the film of cataract in our eyes. We are not so blind as formerly. we were able to evaluate ideas and things more correctly. And you have so constantly held before us the ideal of doing some service to humanity before we die, that we must be very poor material if we do not respond to your teaching. So my gratitude goes out towards you. By the way, if you read the letters of Carl Jung had an extensive correspondence with Subramanian Iyer. They had a big debate because Jung didn't believe in a pure consciousness. Jung said, the only consciousness I can conceive of is a consciousness with an ego. And Iyer tried to convince him that that was a very limited lower form of consciousness and that there's such a thing as pure consciousness. And there's a footnote in the letters to Jung which says that Iyer visited him on a trip to England, accompanied by the young Paul Brunton. So Paul Brunton was with Iyer when they met Carl Jung much later.
And also has many books about the philosophy of Iyer also.
Right. There's many books.
Those are interested to read.
Iyer's presentation of Advaita Vedanta. So now PB returns to the West a changed person. Ayers really had an impact on him. It reminds us how PB's insatiable quest for knowledge and truth led him to many teachers and teachings, and a diversity and inclusiveness that characterizes his writing. So PB, even if he revered Ramana Maharishi the rest of his life and always considered him his teacher, he didn't limit himself. And we read also in the notebooks about PB what calls the independent path, which is to follow your heart and to not be stuck and to seek out the wisdom you need for your own growth from different sources.
So the teachings beyond yoga, right?
Hidden teaching beyond yoga. So after meeting Iyer, he writes the hidden teaching beyond yoga. And a lot of people get upset because they think he's rejecting yoga. He's saying, but you said meditation is important and we need to do this. It was a big controversy. He got thousands of cranky letters. And PB had to explain, I'm not rejecting yoga. I'm saying there's something more than yoga, beyond yoga. So PB goes back to the West. He spends time in Europe, giving talks all around Europe. If you read the book, The Inner Reality, which is also called Discover Yourself, those chapters are the talks he was giving in Europe at that time in different countries. And then he went to England and then he went to the US. And eventually, making his way around the world, he came back to India again in 1939. But we'll stop here. And then in our next
presentation, we're speaking about.
Before, PB had a secretary who was in India this time. And his secretary recorded his memories of PB. So the next video, we're going to have someone read the recorded memories of the personal secretary of PB who lived with PB during this time. And then
we are going to present to you this the third visit in India in 1939, when he became, I could say, attracted in India because the
World War
II, and he spent 7 years in India. That will be after this video Michael is speaking about. Well, I hope you like the presentation. We are happy to share with you this, especially being here in the same place where Paul Brunton was. Even if he said we don't have to go anywhere, we don't have to come to India. But we want to share that really our experiences are being so beautiful and so profound.
So we hope that we've given you a taste.
See you next time.